Now, this is an interesting, insight that we can take back to ancient times. But St. Thomas Aquinas in 1265 writes his Summa Theologica, this seminal text of Western philosophy. Forget just the theology, just Western philosophy. And in it, he talks about this very interesting thing. He says that mankind, humankind, we'd say today, has 4 idols. Everybody pursues one or more of 4 idols, and he calls them the substitutes for God. Because his supposition is that we all want God, but God is extremely inconvenient. A lot of one-sided conversations and a ton of rules. So we look for substitutes that have kind of these divine characteristics. The problem is they're 180 degrees off God. They're money, power, pleasure, and fame. Fame, he says, honor, which has different connotations. I have a son who's a Marine who serves with honor. That's not what we mean. We're talking about admiration, envy of other people of you, which is people want that, or just prestige, or maybe fame. Some people actually want to be famous, but let's just call it money, power, pleasure, and fame. Everybody, I play this game, what's my idol? And I'll ask people, not what's your actual idol, but what is not your idol? Of these 4, money, power, pleasure, fame, what's the one that least attracts you, that you could get rid of with total impunity? You don't care. And then we'll start eliminating, and we're going to find your idol, is the whole thing. Wow. Now, the interesting thing about that is that what he says is not that you'll go to hell if you do that. He says you'll be unhappy if you don't recognize the idol, if you don't recognize the idols in your life. The trouble is the limbic system of your brain, Mother Nature, that tyrant, tells you that you'll actually be happy if you get your idol. And so you chase it and you chase it. You can't quite figure out what you're going to do if you get it. Like Tom's going to get, hundreds of millions or billions of dollars. What are you going to do with that money that you would actually like? And you can't quite figure out. Well, yeah, because if you articulate it, if I say you'll buy a yacht, and you're like, that sounds like kind of a hassle to have a yacht. Maybe it sounds good, but not that good, right? The real reason you want that is because you want admiration, because you want the validation of what it represents of you to you. You want this transference of social comparison you've always done with other people. You want to actually feel the thing that you felt for others about yourself. That's what the idols do. That's the nasty switcheroo. That's the despotism of this of mistaking the intrinsic good for the instrumentality. That's why Thomas Aquinas was so astute in what he was talking about here. So when we play this game, and we see what is actually holding us back. And you experience this. Absolutely. You were chasing the thing, getting more and more and more miserable because you were actually getting closer and closer to your idol and realizing it will not realize one single thing that you needed for your own happiness. It had no intrinsic worth. Look, there's anything about money, by the way. The research on money is very clear that it doesn't actually ever bring happiness. It lowers unhappiness, which are processed in different hemispheres of the brain. Happiness and unhappiness are not opposites. They're different experiences. And what happens is at low levels, money will lower unhappiness. So when I could finally go to the dentist, I felt better. The trouble is I don't know how to do the sums inside my brain. I just knew I felt better. And we always mistake lower unhappiness for higher happiness. And so early on, you're like, wow, I went from $15,000 to $20,000 a year, and I felt better. I actually felt better about myself. I was able to eliminate some of these sources of misery, so I'm happier. And so you get into the pattern early on. You wire your brain when you're a young person working your way up the ladder. More money, feel better. That means more happiness. And you realize that going from $250,000 to $300,000 is not doing it. That because it's not big enough jump apparently. And so you go and you go and you go and you go and you go, and you're basically just chasing a lure. And that's what you experienced. And that's why you were miserable, right? Because you couldn't get there from here.
It's interesting. Yes. I put different words to it, and I'm curious to see what you think about this. So I think about it from an evolutionary standpoint. So we have directives in our brain that there is going to be a sense of dis-ease if you don't do certain things. I think that deep and profound unhappiness can come from pursuing the wrong thing, so that you're spending your time doing things that they rob you of energy instead of giving you energy. But I also think that people end up profoundly unhappy by not doing things that nature wants them to do.
Right.
And I think one of the things that nature wants us to do, and so just not doing it will be a problem, is work really hard to turn your potential into skill set.
Yeah.
And so if things come easily to you, even though you're on top of the world and everybody else admires you and wants to be you, that there will be a sense of dis-ease for you
Right.
because you're not working hard.
It doesn't feel meritorious.
Yeah, nature has to find a proxy, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So nature wants you to have children, so it makes sure that sex is intensely pleasurable. But that's really just a proxy for have kids. So that I find really interesting, that nature is working in these weird proxies. So people end up like, you think you're supposed to do one thing, chase money, power, fame, whatever. And you're like, why does this suck? But all of those things actually do have utility. And so the thing with money is people are always going to pursue it. The thing with fame is people are always going to pursue it. Why? Because it actually has utility. So money, for instance, is more powerful than people think, not less, but it isn't what you've been told. So it's never what myself and everyone else included is trying to do is feel better about themselves.
Right.
It won't help with that. It
Right.
cannot touch your self-esteem. And that's like the biggest like mind fuck ever.
Your wife won't love you more.
Your wife won't
Your
love you
children
more.
won't respect you more when you have more money. Exactly.
And more
You-
troubling,
Yes.
you won't respect you more.
Yes.
Which is ultimately because other people will. Like people treat me differently because I have some micro fame and because I have
it's
money.
actually troubling too. Because when you know somebody is instrumentalizing you, when you know somebody's objectifying you because of this outside characteristic, it makes you profoundly uncomfortable.
It's interesting.
People hate that. You know, it's the one thing where we will allow people to objectify us. You're well known, you're successful, and people will be nice to you because of that. And deep down, you know that they don't love you. And
It's not how it plays out in my head.
how does it play out in your head?
That I have no ability to be vulnerable around them.
Oh, I see. For
And
sure,
so
but
if
that's
I
the same
can't be
part of
vulnerable,
self-objectification.
then-
That's the same part of objectification. And if when you're objectified, you can't be a full person. There's another interesting thing that might actually apply. You're a creative. You're fundamentally a creative. When you were doing your work, you were thrown off the creative process. Now, why is creativity intensely pleasurable? You've read the work of Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, the great social psychologist who wrote a very famous book called Flow, Flow, Flow. And what it talks about is how hours turn to minutes of sheer pleasure when you're in this flow state, when you're doing something that you can master. It's not too easy. It requires your ability, but you can master it because of your skill, and you can get into this groove. Creatives must create. If creatives are not creating, they will be miserable because they can't attain a flow state. It's very possible, Tom, that when you were in this part of your career, you needed to create. You wanted to quit and go to Greece to do creation. You were basically craving that. It's like you had no protein in your diet for a year or something. And it's like, I don't know, I just can't stop thinking about peanut butter. Well, because you were craving this macronutrient in your psyche. And you were never getting a flow state. And if you're denied the flow state that uniquely comes to you through creativity, you're gonna be practically suicidal.
Yeah, it was definitely a rough period. That's interesting. I've never thought about it as being intrinsically a reflection of the pleasurability of flow, but you might be right. It's just I feel alive. That is the right word. I feel alive when I'm creating. I am never happier than when I'm creating.
It's amazing. People who are fundamentally creatives, look, same thing. You know, when I retired as a CEO and I came back to writing, speaking, and teaching, I'm a new man. I'm a new man for the past 3 years. It's extraordinary.
You said something a while ago. I didn't want to interrupt you, but I want to go back to it now. You said you rediscovered yourself.
Yeah.
What does that mean? Like you need a sense of identity? Is that a core part of this? Like when you say you rediscovered, is it a self-narrative?
It's you know who you deeply are as a person. You're acquainted with yourself. You're acquainted with your true self. And just as with people who are around you, you can create an identity that's actually not authentic. You can create an identity to yourself that's not authentic. You can be giving yourself a self-narrative that's not true to actually who you are as a person.
What does it mean who you are? What you're good at, what you love?
It generally speaking has to do with being in the zone of what you actually love to do and what you appreciate most in your life, when you're in line with your own values, when you're living according to your own values. So Jung would have put it this way. Carl Jung, his definition of his understanding of happiness was that you need to understand your own values, what you value, what you think is proper and correct and moral. And if you know what that is and can articulate it and live according to that, you will be happy. Do
you agree with that?
I think it's actually, there's a lot of truth to that. because you have to figure out what your model of the world actually is, what you think truth is, and then living in accord with your own values, with your own integrity is really critically important, because when people live outside that groove, they're never in equilibrium. They're just never. The problem is that they're not comfortable. They're not comfortable in their own skin. And I've noticed this. I was working. It was good being the president of a think tank. I was lucky to be president of a think tank. I believed in the work, but it wasn't who I was. And so I was kind of out of my groove for 10 years, 10 and a half years. And when I went back to writing and speaking and teaching and doing creative work, I said, it's
Is that
weird.
always who you were? Or was that because you switched into crystal?
No, it's always who I was. Always a creative. As a kid, I was painting and writing and composing music. And I just always wanted to be, creativity is the most important thing in my life, or curiosity and creativity. Are the most important thing that I can, not the most important thing in my life, the most important thing that I can do, and when I'm actually happiest. And when I was managing a large workforce, managing a lot of creatives to their best selves, they had certainly creative moments to it, to be sure, but it wasn't comfortable to me. And when my second curve, which was much more crystallized intelligence, is also a lot more creative. So I was kind of out of equilibrium for a long time during that period as well, which compounds the problem of my declining fluid intelligence, also not being in a creative role. But it's just so much better. I teach at a great university, which I love. I write for a magazine every week about things that I'm really interested in. I get to talk to you about it. Beats working.
So true. For some reason, I was just thinking today, I was pacing, listening to you, and I was like, I'm technically working right now.
Weird.
I was like, this is cool.
Weird. It is super cool. And, there are people that I've met. It's interesting. I talk to lawyers who don't feel like they're working. I talked to a guy who's putting in cabinets in my house, and he's super into putting in cabinets. He loves making cabinets. He was talking about all the details, and he's so proud of his work. And I say, do you like your work? And he said, it doesn't feel like work. I went on a fishing expedition, deep sea fishing expedition with my son Carlos. He loves to fish, and we go fishing. And the guy says, every morning I wake up and he says, today I'm going fishing. And so this is what we all need to find. We need to, each person, because we have the blessing of living in an economy where you can do a lot of different things. The problem is that people chase these extrinsic lures, the money, power, pleasure, and fame, and they get out of the groove of what they're supposed to do, and then they wonder why they're unhappy.
If you like that clip, check out another powerful clip right here, and I'll see you there.